Well, hello there. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our spotlight on Gies faculty. Today we have a marketing professor with us. His name is Aric Rindfleisch. He has been at Gies for, my goodness, 13 years, having arrived from the University of Wisconsin Business School. Welcome.
Thank you, John.
So, Aric, what inspired you to become an academic in the first place?
Well, thank you for asking, John. If I think about the first step of that journey, was probably when I was an undergraduate student at Central Connecticut State University. And I had two folks who encouraged me to get a PhD. One was my friend, Ed Fisher. And Ed said, why don't you get a PhD? He had a PhD in psychology. I taught for a bit, was a practicing psychologist. And so why don't you get a PhD? So that was one influence. Second was Dick Cardinelli. Dick was, we used to call back in those days, John, MIS, Management Information Systems.
Oh,
Now it's
sure.
usually just IS. And he was both my MIS professor, but also my battalion commander, because I was in the Army Reserve. And I was
Huh?
a young second lieutenant. And Dick said, when I was talking about getting an MBA, why don't you get your PhD? And then the third person was a few years later, I went to Ithaca, New York to Cornell for my MBA. And there's a visiting professor named Manoj Agarwal, who's a professor at SUNY Binghamton just down the road, but he was
Hmm.
teaching a course. And he talked to all of us about the path of getting a PhD, being a marketing professor. And that stuck with me. I talked to Manoj a bit more, and I found I didn't like working for a living, having to wear a student tie and do things that others wanted me to do. And I thought I really liked being a student a lot more than working. So I decided to go back for my PhD at the University of Wisconsin.
Why marketing?
A good question. Actually, John, at the time, I was interested in two things, marketing and also international business. So I applied to both programs, IB and marketing. Decided to go for marketing. And most likely from my experience working in marketing research, I took a lot of interest in the analytical portion of what I was doing in my job. I wanted to learn more about it. So it's a combination with my academic background, but also my work experience.
So clearly, you chose not only a teaching route, but a research route, as most professors do. And I wonder, in all the years of your research work, what have you discovered that you consider to be significant?
That's a good question, John. Well, to be honest with you, I think my most significant contribution to academic has been my teaching, not my research, which probably most faculty won't say. But I'm lucky enough to be part of our wonderful iMBA program. And I taught one of the first courses in that program way back when. I forgot how long now, maybe 10 years ago, 2015, I believe. And that's a course on digital marketing, actually, two courses on
Hmm.
digital marketing. And combined, they're the second most popular online marketing course in the world. Google
Wow.
has beaten me out, but that's not too bad. You know, they're Google and just me. So I have 750,000 learners. So although I feel I have made many research contributions, I think I've definitely reached more people through my teaching than my research. But to answer your question, it's really a good question and something I really probably haven't thought as much as before. So it's been an off the cuff answer. But about 20 years ago, I had done some research with a good friend of mine, Jim Burrows. Jim's now a professor at the McIntyre School at the University of Virginia, but we were also colleagues together in a doctorate program at Wisconsin. And early in our career, going back to the early 2000s, we had done some research, a series of papers actually, on materialism, which we
Ah,
define as the value people place on the acquisition of material objects like expensive cars, homes, and clothes. And at the time and still today, there's been a fairly robust finding, a fairly robust negative correlation between materialistic aspirations and subjective well-being. So people who value materialism more on average tend to be less happy, more anxious, often depressed, sometimes lonely. And there are a variety of different theoretical perspectives why that could be the case. So we actually created our own theory we call the conflicting values theory. And that theory, I think looking back 20 years plus, is probably, I could be biased, but I think perhaps, the leading explanation of why materialism leads to negative well-being. And in essence, it's this very simple idea. So the core assumption here is that materialism is one of many values that people can hold. So there's a fellow named Shalom Schwartz who's a psychologist at Hebrew University in Israel, who has a well-known, he calls the Schwartz circumplex value. And he claims that across the world, people are basically connected to 10 core values. And the circumplex is a circle, so it has values that are on opposite sides of the circle, tend to be oppositional. And the key dimension in his model is self-enhancement versus self-transcendence. So you can think of materialism being kind of laying on that side of self-enhancement, hedonism, individualism, and then you have a variety of other values that could be on the other side. So we linked it up to using Schwartz's model as a foundation, is saying that essentially, at least in American society, people receive conflicting messages often. So on one side, we're told to value striving for material objects, often by marketers through advertisements. The other side, we're also told we should value things that are more collective in nature, like family, community, and religion. So we found in our research was that individuals who tried to hold both sets of values, materialism and collective-oriented values, tend to be the most unhappy. So henceforth, the notion of the conflicting values, materialism, that basically the reason why materialism is problematic, especially in a country like America, is because it conflicts with what we believe we should value. Now, one caveat is we do find that individuals who are low on everything, so people who are low on materialism but also low on collective values, tend not to be very happy either. So I'm not saying that that's an answer to lower those values, but essentially I think it does uncover kind of, at least at the time, a novel explanation that was a bit more sophisticated than the existing theories at the time. So it's a long answer to your question, but thanks for asking.
But it seems almost counterintuitive. You would assume that a marketing professor would be studying ways to get you to buy more stuff and not studying the motivations behind what happens to you when you buy more stuff and coming out with a conclusion that frankly says buying more stuff is not going to make you happy. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I think you're right. So if you look at the materialism research, a lot of it has been done in psychology. So a fellow named Tim
Right.
Kasser has done a lot of work. At the time we began, there were very few people. One of the leaders was Marsha Richards, University of Missouri was one of the leaders in this domain. But there's more doing it now. Personally, one of the best things about being a professor is you can, study almost anything that you want, as
Indeed.
long as people believe in what you're doing. And then if I look back to myself, as I mentioned, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was raised by my grandparents, living on, I think, $500 a month Social Security. But I was living at the edge of a very affluent town, Farmington, Connecticut. So I was going to school with a lot of rich kids. And I do
Mm.
think I was just, sort of based on that background, I wouldn't say envious, but feeling that I didn't have nearly enough. And perhaps if I had those things that my friends had, I might be happier. So perhaps my interest in that dates back to my childhood upbringing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I am a first-gen college student and grad as well, from a fairly humble background, so I can completely resonate. Your story resonates with me in many ways. So, Aric, what's a misconception that students may have about your field, and how do you help them see it differently?
Well, if I can, Joe, I'll give you two answers to that. One is if I think about undergraduate students, if I can take that as my focus,
Sure.
the biggest misconception is that you can actually earn a PhD in marketing. Many students seem to be surprised that I have a PhD and that my fellow colleagues in marketing here at Illinois have PhDs. That's one surprise. And given my own background, I tried. I've done almost just every year in my career. At the end of the semester, my last class is tomorrow. I'll do this again tomorrow. I'll talk about the benefits of getting a PhD, why it's a great career. Hopefully, it still stays that way with the advent of AI. So that's one misconception. The second is, which is probably not news to you, what is marketing? So most folks have I'll probably think more broadly out there. I think if, say, most folks in America may have somewhat of maybe a pejorative view of marketing or a somewhat negative view. I think our students probably don't have that since they're studying marketing. but they tend to equate marketing with things like sales or advertising. At least in the courses I teach, I try to give a broader view of marketing. And essentially, I use the American Marketing Association definition of marketing as a system of institutions, processes, organizations that facilitate transactions between buyers and sellers with the hope that both parties end up better off than before. So we talk about what that is. And I think I'm in good company there. I remember there's a great quote by Peter Drucker, if I'm not mistaken, that says, a firm has two functions, marketing and innovation.
Indeed.
So,
Uh,
yeah.
I had the pleasure of knowing Peter fairly well. I would agree with that for sure. How do you bring real world relevance into your classroom for your students? Are you doing it through some experiential learning projects, through case studies? How do you make it real for them as opposed to theoretical?
It's a great question. And I do that in many ways over the years. And, the course, degree to which I do that varies with the course that I'm teaching and the audience that I'm teaching to. I'm going to give you two examples. One class I'm teaching this semester, one I'm teaching next semester. So the class I'm teaching this semester is called BADM 420, Advanced Marketing Management. What does that mean? Well, essentially, it's a capstone marketing course. I treat it as a marketing strategy course. And so in that course, we bring in this relevance to the actual world through a very, I'd say, historic simulation I played as an MBA student back in 1988, if you can believe that, called Markstrap. You may have heard of Markstrap.
Sure.
That came out of INSEAD way back when. It's much more refined than today. So I set up my class. I have 50 students. So we have two industries, Alpha and Bravo, 5 teams each composed of 5 students, and they compete with one another to make essentially all the strategic decisions of a marketing organization. So we wrap that up, and then through that, they really get experience what it's like to, develop new products, position them. So we have sophisticated techniques like contour analysis, multidimensional scaling, and it's a very much, I think two things nice about Markstrap. One, it is very much unstructured in the sense that students need to find their own way. And two, it's dynamics. The effect of any one decision depends upon what other teams are doing.
I
So I
bet
think
that's
those,
the highlight of the course too for the students.
yeah, it's very learned. And then the second course I talk briefly about is next semester I teach a very different course called Making Things. That's more of a lab course because one of the things I established when I came to the University of Illinois was the world's first 3D printing lab at a business school called the Illinois Maker Lab. We're up in the third floor of our business instructional facility, on the top of the grand staircase.
Mhm.
And that course, teams of 3 students will go from basically meeting each other in week 1 to the end of week 15, conceptualizing, designing, prototyping, printing, manufacturing, marketing a product of their choice. So I teach that for about a decade. Students really seem to enjoy that experience. A bit off-putting at first because I don't tell them what to make. There's no client; they are the client, and they are creating the product. And it's a lot of fun for me, and I think the students enjoy it as well.
What kind of different products have they made over the years?
A variety of things. There's so many things. Just thinking about, we've had folks who create custom planters where you can scan someone's face, put it on the side of a planter.
Hmm.
We've had individuals who've created water bottle holders for people who are on crutches.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
we've had folks develop, I would say, somewhat exotic cookie cutters that may contain motivational messages or demotivational messages, whatever you want. So a variety of people just really limited by their match. Usually it's something made out of plastic, 3D printed. We've had folks who printed versions of a famous alma mater statue and sell that at graduation. I was told that was legal, so hopefully that is.
Didn't violate any copyright, obviously,
Yeah,
right?
I hope not. I hope not.
Aric, what's a recent piece of research or perhaps even a book or an idea that's influenced your thinking recently?
Well, Jeff, is okay. I talk about a book that came out about 10 years ago, and so not too recent. But when you're my age, maybe that is recent. And the reason I talk about this book is that it really influenced my thinking, both from my research, but also my teaching, especially my online teaching. It's a book by my friend David Bell. David was a marketing professor at the Wharton School. He was involved, my understanding was that David was involved in the launch of a number of very well-known startups such as Diapers.com and Warby Parker,
Mm.
and had, in compensation for his marketing advice, had secured a slice of the IPOs and is now a venture capitalist in Manhattan. But David has a wonderful book based, actually, in this book, he talks a lot about these companies, Diaper.com and Warby Parker. It's called Location is Still Everything. Came out about 10 years ago. And in that book, David offers, I think the reason I like it is because David identified something that I had observed, but wasn't able to fully conceptualize. And not that he identified this observation, he actually explains in this book the reasons why it exists. So what happened was, David was involved with these companies like Warby Parker. What he found was that despite these being online businesses, their actual diffusion or adoption was physically determined. So, for example, if you think about a new startup like Warby Parker when it first came out, that the probability that you know Hannah, who lives, I guess, in San Francisco, would buy Warby Parker is increased if someone living next to her in her zip code also buys from Warby Parker. So
Mm.
why would that matter? Why would location matter in a world of digital online buying? He says a couple of things. One, he says the principle of homophily, that people tend to live next to people like them. So if something appeals to someone living in a region, probably other people in that region would also appeal to from the principle of homophily. But also talks about more concrete things, such as having that Warby Parker box outside by your dumpster, seeing it. So it was a very interesting
Yeah.
hypothesis. And so
Yeah.
I taught that into my teaching. So in my online course, The Digital Marketing Revolution, we talk about the relationship between analog and digital. And the second week of that course, the first week is about digital domination. And that's pretty easy to see in many cases, such as what we're doing today. But you still have, even in 2025, cases of analog resistance. And when I talk about this concept of analog resistance as we unfold our digital revolution journey, I have to rely on that book and the principle. So I really appreciate David writing that book and helping to make my fuzzy ideas much more concrete through his help.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, what's one real world implication of your
Yeah.
research that you wish more business leaders understood? I wonder if it goes back to materialism, which you mentioned earlier, or something else.
I actually talk about something else. So my dissertation research at Wisconsin way back when, I looked at something we called new product alliances. So these are firms who formed alliances to cooperate with other companies to do R&D on new products.
Hmm.
And in research, what we found, this is research done with my advisor, Christine Mormon, who's now a professor at Duke University. So Chris and I found that there were two different types of new product alliances. We call them horizontal versus vertical alliances. So the vertical alliance was your typical form of inter-firm cooperation, maybe between a buyer and supplier, for example. But the horizontal alliances were alliances between competitors, where competitors formed a coalition in response to a common threat or a common need. And often those threats were either, it came in three forms: changing customer needs, second, competitive pressures, perhaps from overseas, and third, regulatory challenges. Well, the government issued an edict that affected everyone in the industry, so they band together in collective response. So from that research and work I've done subsequently, I think the takeaway would be that kind of competition is overrated in the sense that you can also, first of all, cooperate with your competitors. And also, subsequent research that I've done, we actually find that firms, and I'm not the only one, there's a healthy body of research on this, such as folks like Scott Armstrong at the Wharton School, that firms that are too competitor focused, I'm not saying not be aware of the competitors, but firms that have the zero sum orientation, I win, you lose, or take a line from Ray Kroc. If my competitor was drowning, I'd stick the hose in their throat, right? So firms that have that orientation tend to be generally less successful. So the takeaway, from my research would be that you don't always have to destroy competitors. In fact, it may not be a good idea. You can actually thrive by working with them within, antitrust laws, of course. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So while you may not be a dean yet, I'm going to make you dean of the day and ask you a more general question about business education and its future. Maybe you can complete this sentence for me. The business school of the future would have much more of blank. What would blank be for you?
Okay, the business school, that's a tough question. The business school of the future would have much more, I would
Uh,
drop the of, I would say much more humanity.
hmm.
Humanity.
So explain that.
Well, this is just a theory, of course, but clearly the business world, and I would say business was no exception, are facing uh, unprecedented development with artificial intelligence. You may say an existential threat in some ways.
Right.
So, in a world in which we really can't beat AI, what's the winning play? So, you probably can't out analyze AI. We can't out efficiency AI, but I think we can be better humans than the AI or the robots. So, I'd imagine that business with the future will thrive by focusing on the humanity. You know, um, Perhaps sometimes the mistakes that may lead to unexpected, unexpected wins. I think about the launch of the iPhone being, to some degree, I think, based on the failures of the Apple Newton in the early part of the 21st century.
Yep.
So something about, and I do think that firms will value at some point to become a rarity that being better humans, whatever that may mean, would be probably something that will be hopefully somewhat AI proof.
Mainly because a computer algorithm can't have a whole lot of humanity attached to it, right?
Or if nothing else, it might be a bit unsettling for some.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Eric, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've been
Take care.
speaking to marketing professor Aric Rindfleisch of the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. Stay tuned and watch our other episodes in this series to meet other faculty at the Gies College of Business. Thanks for watching. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants.